If you're a leader whose mind moves fast and wide, then AI is not a neutral story for you. Some of us are quietly using it to scaffold the things that those standard systems never really fix, while others are deep in industries arguing about it right now, stuck in the same loop. Do I use it or don't I? And what does it mean for the work that I'm known for? And underneath a lot of it, I think sits fear. AI is coming for my job. AI is going to flatten what makes me, me. Well, my first guest for the Jagged Brilliance interview series is a good friend of mine, James Shechet. His question that he's putting out into the world right now isn't what AI is going to replace, but how we can actually use it to leverage human creativity instead of outsourcing it, and how we can build systems that free us from the always more hustle culture, the one that existed long before this conversation about AI gurus even began. The question we're sitting with today is this: how do we use it to expand what we're already capable of, both our creativity and capacity, without trading our well-being to get there? Let's dive in. James, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You and I have been riffing on your journey out of YouTube, Disney, this incredible, let's call it workland that you've been in, which for many of us is just a creative dream, and now into this entrepreneurial journey. And I'm so curious, and I know our listeners will be too, what's that been like to swap over?
So I've just started noticing, while working previously in the corporations, that a free hour has become more precious than what that free hour was like even 5 years ago with what's possible with AI. So just imagine, the things you could prompt, the things you could build in that hour versus before we had ChatGPT or any of these LLMs. And so I just started noticing that there's a lot of time that's spent in the meetings where you're talking about the work, and that becomes more expensive than just building and doing something. And I started noticing that it became really valuable to have your own attention and time. And if you could afford to take a step away and reclaim your time, and then use that time to focus your attention on something that gives you energy, or something that, valuable that you would want to make for the world, or something that you've been itching to build for yourself, now is one of the best times to do it. And even in theory, the longer you wait, the more productive that future hour will be anyway, because it's becoming easier and easier to turn ideas into reality through a sequence of questions and prompting and recommendations. So it just felt like a great time to do that for myself, and to explore and build towards something that gives me energy. And a lot of these businesses that I've worked for have such talented people that, open your mind. And the more you get to know people, the more you realize how, special they are. And there's so many of these people that are becoming available in the work world through just people, unfortunately being laid off.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because when I think about you as James, the AI guy, I think for me, what differentiates what you're sharing on YouTube, and I'll throw the link to your channel, obviously, for our listeners, but really creative ways to approach working alongside AI and with learning and with curiosity.
For me, I've noticed the importance of your attention more than ever. And, if you're working for an employer or a boss, a manager, a business, there's some trade that you're making with your time and attention for the salary and the health insurance that they're giving you. And for many people, maybe that's, the life that makes sense for them. I felt like there was just this point where my attention was becoming more valuable to me than that exchange for the salary. Because if you have that free hour is so valuable today than it was even 5 years ago with what's possible. And it just felt like there's so many interruptions that are happening in the corporate workplace. Not many businesses are being run, ideally super well and perfect, right? There's a lot of these hidden things that make it become almost a sequence of dysfunctions. And And so you end up as a person trying to coordinate around those issues to create those outcomes that you would hope for. And instead it felt like, a person or an individual that's time rich can start competing with, these resource rich organizations. And that's like a concept that I'm stealing from Peter Steinberger, who's the guy that, created OpenClaw. But I think it's really resonating more than ever. And I think if you compare the odds with what's possible and where the upside opportunities are, right? There's so much higher upside now with how to make money on the internet than there is to get that job that's going to cap you at some salary because they're going to, have some budget for how much they're going to want to pay you. And so I think it's worthwhile to take that risk. And I saw that opportunity to take that risk for myself.
I think some of the listeners who are joining in who have either got, I'm thinking of two listeners, actually, two fear points. One I hear is the creatives that I work with who are very fearful that AI is going to come and take their creative dreams away, take the creative role away and or creative skills away. And I want to hear you thinking about that. And then the other listener I'm thinking of is kind of still stuck in the, AI can fix my emails, AI is going to do my advanced Google search, but they're not necessarily knowing what you mean by starting a business or earning money or learning on the run. So of those two listeners, which one do you want to speak to first? Because I feel like they both want to hear from you today.
Sure. Let's start with the people that are afraid of being completely replaced or it's going to take over their jobs. I think the mindset to have is to learn new skills and to evolve with this technology, because I think resisting it's someone that maybe decided that they don't want to get a smartphone anymore. And so because of that, they're unable to answer a text with their smartphone or answer an email. And I think there's also this era of people that were, farmers, for example, where most of the employment that was happening in the US were people that were contributing to that kind of work. And then like over time, there was this new wave of jobs and opportunities and technology where we then all became more white collar or, work in an office people, but maybe the office people of today are the farmers of yesterday. And so there will be a new thing. So as long as you keep up with the change, I think everyone will find their place for themselves.
I think you and I are quite optimistic like that. And I think we probably hang around in similar circles. And I don't want that to take away anybody's legitimate concerns around the fact that we're probably moving into a transition phase where things are going to change. I'm personally all for autonomy. And I think that if you choose to not move with AI, that is, wow, we're living in a time where you can actually make a choice. Isn't that incredible? And so if you can make that choice, that's all for you. But to your point, I wonder how much in the acceleration of change is where the fear is coming from for people. And I look at your approach, no tech background to my knowledge, at least not for starting up, and then sharing that publicly, building that publicly. I'm going to start with no knowledge, no insight, no university degree, and I'm just going to play and see where I go. What had to happen for you in terms of that mindset shift to get in and start working with and alongside AI?
Well, it's a lot of the same goals with doing anything, right? It's, like what's the longer term vision of what I'm trying to do with this that I know is possible because I've been seeing this from other people on the internet. And then how do I get there with where I am now? And trying to focus on doing one thing well and building that muscle. And then once that is a muscle memory, then expanding on it. One of the analogies that I've been saying before on this is to think of using AI as playing an instrument. You could hear music and appreciate it and think, wow, that's a great song or that's a really cool artist. But you can't necessarily on day one just start playing that song yourself unless you really know how to play the instrument. So build the muscle memory, like first learn your scales or how to play the note. and then that becomes second nature and easier, then you could start, doing other more advanced scales, and then you could start switching it up with improvisation in a way, or try another instrument that has another kind of like kinetic energy that you give to make the sound. Like in one sense you're hitting it with your finger, another sense you're blowing air, or you're plucking the string. That's, you could think of that as using different tools in this ecosystem of AI, where there might be Perplexity or Claude or HeyGen or random other tools that you could connect together, and then it kind of becomes like this orchestra that's an ecosystem around you and your values and needs and purpose and mission. So
that is such a helpful analogy. And I think especially for people, at least when I hear people talking about their angst around AI, some of the concerns are, I just feel like I'm already so behind that I just don't even know where to get started. That analogy of thinking of it like the orchestra and all the pieces coming together, it's kind of like that person for me wants to already be the conductor of a fully formed, rehearsed band. When you think about those component parts put together towards the end performance.
Well, for anyone that is busy right now with their job, there's something in the back of their head that might make them wish, oh, I wish I had all this free time that I could have to then do all the things. Well, what I did was I actually gave myself that time where, I walked away from my full-time job and career to give myself that freedom to explore. And then once I did that, I noticed like, wow, I have all this time, but I don't feel like I'm using it optimally. And I was becoming anxious with that thought, where it's like, wow, I wasted this whole day, right? I had this expectation that I would be super productive, but I didn't quite, perfectly execute the day. And so actually the starting point was my mindset about it, setting my expectations to realize that, I'm still a human being, and you shouldn't expect to be this perfect machine. So it was more of having this understanding and compassion for yourself and how you use your time, and more recognition in that, okay, in a few weeks, I've noticed a progression in my skills in this area. And so I'm at least better than yesterday, and that's going to have this compounding effect. So, and to have that comfort that the things I'm doing today are very different from what I did a month ago. It became almost like a self-reflection exercise, because before in a job, there's, a lot of structure that's given to you, a lot of pressure of an immediate deliverable that's often provided for you. And instead, I need to think about, how do I create that for myself? What makes it easy to wake up in the morning and to have then the time and to have that activation energy that I could channel towards something that, can bring some form of value or excites me or stimulates my curiosity, and find that intersection of what is fun and interesting and ideally, valuable to the world in some way or to myself, and to identify that and then work towards that.
That's brilliant. In so many ways, I think AI's got such a spotlight on it now for very good reasons. It really is making rapid change, but it's not that different in terms of something to start that feels big, that just actually needs the next best step. And something that I'm noticing that is maybe lacking a little bit in terms of nuance in the conversation around AI adoption and AI skill development is recognizing that this is about actually tweaking it to work for you. I think I read on your Substack recently an article that you pulled across from your channel around the paradox of wanting both AI productivity and peace. How are you setting up your day to protect that peace and still create alongside AI?
So to give some context to this, I noticed when I was, pursuing, information and knowledge for how to be productive with AI, I was getting thrown in all these directions. And it made me realize that is probably not a unique journey to what I'm experiencing. Probably everyone that's trying to learn stuff is getting thrown in all these directions where maybe in 1 minute they were trying to just do this one thing and then saw something else that seems cool and interesting. And then all of a sudden, 15 minutes in, you're trying to do 5 things at once. It felt like one of the first things to maybe do with AI is help me with prioritization and managing my inflow of inputs. So like if your first project can be managing all projects, then that will have a lot of leverage for you. So what I did was I like set up an agent that I'm able to give, the context of all my priorities, all the things I'm up to, new things that we need to throw into the bucket of this is intake and stuff to consider in our queue. And then to have like an organized system of notes with, here's what's prioritized, here's what's later, here's what you're waiting on, here's things that you've actually finished that you could look back later if you want. So I like sunk that up with a note-taking app called Obsidian, which is very helpful to connect to any of these AI LLMs, and you could create like a persona with instructions where you could create rules where it's helping you like kind of organize the notes and is running on a schedule to make sure that the next set of things that you should focus on that gives you that most leverage is being called out. And that's what I have right now. It feels like to me there's almost like a pendulum swing that's happening where the same technology that created this new kind of problem of information overload and exposure, we should actually use that to help us with the filter again and think of it as an extra layer of protection with the persona of you and your intelligence, which I would say is going to become like this hybrid partnership with AI, where you could use that to help kind of narrow what you're exposed to. And, and that could be like a little bit of a dangerous place to go, because then you could get into the topics of censorship and XYZ. But at least for how you would want to curate for yourself, ideally it's things that help you grow and introduce like a rationally positive outlook, on life and what's possible. So
and critical thinking so much has to come into that too. To your point, I think the danger comes with if we create an echo chamber for ourselves and curate our world in a way that only reinforces our ideas. I would say that the counter argument to that is, to your point, if we're not self-curating the information and the data coming through our own channels, whether you use AI, whether, whatever you do to do that, that the algorithm's going to be doing it for you across not just social media now, but our news channels. So much of the way that mainstream media, social media is moving, there is that concern of the echo effect. What would you say to people who are looking at AI, technology in general, and who are driven by the fear that we're going to get somehow augmented or orchestrated, that we'll lose agency of where we spend our attention and the intentionality behind that? How can we counter that?
It's to step away from the technology from time to time and to have your own kind of mindfulness practice. So that's what I do with my time, where I will go on a thinking walk where, I'm not looking at my phone or anything and just kind of walking and thinking about life, or taking a few minutes to meditate and following a guided meditation, or if you've done it long enough and can self-guide, that's great too. And then also to just read books, like actual paperback books, and have more long form attention taken by things that are not as stimulating. And then just learning hard things too, in general, doing long form writing on your own without the aid of AI. Like, these are all things that will help your kind of brain kind of stay cognitively sharp, and all things that are worth doing that will make you better to engage with the technology when you do decide to use it to augment and accelerate. So it's similar to that concept of sleep and how important that is, where, you want to go through the waking day and do that well, but then you also want to get good sleep. And if you're getting good sleep, that's when the actual memory building and retention is happening in the learning. But if you skip the sleep, then you're going to start forgetting things during your waking day. So I think it's the same with like a cycle of using technology and not, where you'll actually be better if you step away from it for a bit to then go back and have those intentional moments calendared in for yourself, and to also schedule in uninterrupted time to focus on the one most important thing if you can. So, there's this whole concept of flow state. And I think the more you are engaging with your flow, the more fulfilled and happy you generally are, the more you're able to retain and learn things. And people that tap into flow often are generally more productive and fulfilled. And it's why people love surfing, or they love whatever hobby they do, because they're not really paying attention to anything else.
You and I could riff on flow. And the good news is for our listeners, tune in. If you haven't yet been in my world for too long, flow is one of my favorite things to talk about. And it turns out that there's some pretty groovy research I've been diving into that's suggesting that perhaps actually those of us with more of a spiky profile, whether it's that your executive function is different or that you tend to be somebody who dives into more of a monotropic focus, there are parts of our brain that potentially have a better access to flow. I mean, that we want to chase it and then want to stay in it. I think for me, James, the flip side is then the risk and the recognition that actually, in some ways, AI can really feed those dopamine circuits like a gambling machine can, like social media has, like anything that gives us that reward feedback loop. And so I'm always conscious to be building in the scaffolding that watches for the hyperfocus. Have you noticed that yourself within your own workflows as you dive into the new and you start creating? How do you pull yourself out of those sessions to make sure that you do go and do all those practices that we know are so important to us?
I mean, I'll fully engage in those moments where I'm trying to go full steam ahead, and Claude and I are just, prompting away. But then to have those moments where I feel like, okay, I've hit my milestone, I've done the thing, and now I want to memorialize it and get some sleep and come back to it later. And then
stop, because that is so important. Yeah. Come back. Yeah. You said 3 things that are like, yes, they are targets I want our listeners to hear. Okay, so 1, you said that you've hit the milestone. So on that, I want to hear how you define your milestone. How do you even decide what good looks like? But then 2, you said, did you say you're going to memorialize it? You're going to give it, tell me more about that process.
It's basically documenting it in a way that we could look back on later. But basically, memorializing it is helpful because then it becomes a foundation or base of reference for whatever you're trying to do next, if you're trying to make it better or different. So it's just a continuous evolution, I would say, but set clear milestones for whatever you're up to.
What would you say to those who have got a little bit of perfectionism and a little bit of an expectation of getting it right, and so therefore just not getting started because they don't want to waste those other 4 builds?
I would say that mindset, as understandable as it is to have that, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist myself sometimes, it's just going to get in the way. So you're better off just starting and seeing how things evolve as you go than to not start because you want this to be perfect or to get in your own way and let perfect get in the way of good enough. There is that, like, it's like a famous experiment or study, maybe you've heard, where they had half the class take as many pictures as they needed until they had one great picture that they would submit at the end of the class. And then the other half could only take 1 picture, and that would be the one. And the class that did it, that had many options until they got it right, did so much better than the ones that tried to do it in the first shot. So, and the other thing too is I feel like in the AI world and community, we're being sold this narrative of like automating everything in your life and having it all perfectly run. And, hey, I'm this guy on social media and see this perfect workflow I made and comment this so I could give you the copy. I think there's a side to all this that involves the struggle of figuring it out that no one is necessarily completely broadcasting. And so and and because you experience the struggle, it makes you wonder, like, wow, am I not as smart, or am I not as good as these other people that have this perfect workflow or whatever they built? But the struggle is a healthy and important thing to experience to develop your expertise, right? That's how you become an expert, is by kind of productively struggling through this. And that struggle is your opportunity, right? Because you're probably not alone in this. So
I love you for
yeah,
saying that. And I wonder if
yeah,
that is the edge that creatives bring into this whole
yeah,
new era of playing with AI, is that recognition that the struggle just feels so messy when you're in it. And it feels like you should be doing something differently, or if only you had this aspect of yourself that you feel was missing, or this resource, or whatever it is. But anybody who's played around in the creative spaces for long enough knows that the struggle is part of the process. And actually, if you're in the struggle, it's probably a really good indication that, one, you're in a growth zone. So lock in, because you're
yeah.
about to unleash something really unreal. And that, two, that you're doing something differently. I do want to give people who are listening, who haven't yet come across your channel, a bit of an idea as to what it is you're actually building, because you're not just going in and using AI and, changing your email or making a pretty Notion board. What are you building, and how is it different from getting on and using, say, ChatGPT or Claude?
Sure. So what I'm trying to do is not only be productive, but it's also striking that balance of still being a grounded, healthy human as I go along. Because sleeping, eating, reproducing, relationships, these are the foundations of human life that's actually in competition with the modern day system. So what if instead I focus on those things and then have my AI aware of those themes to then help me accomplish what I want? So to answer the question of what I'm building, it's this ecosystem around me that can help me pull that off. That includes the sharing piece, and then the feedback loops with the audience that want to know more about how these things work. And truth of the matter is I don't have all the answers for how I would pull this off necessarily, and that's what I'm discovering as I go.
And then in terms of how to practically do that, so protecting your peace, I know that you've got a 5-step framework that you like to lean back on, and you shared an infographic with me recently. Could you take us through that? What are sort of those 5 pillars that come to mind for you around protecting your peace when using AI?
Yeah. So this was something that I came up with that was when I was in this kind of mess of trying to do more things, but then realizing I need to take a step back and hone in and focus. So I recommend the first part of the productive peace framework is to have your foundational docs. So this is something that explains like who you are, what your business goals are, what you're, hoping to achieve, and then also like your own tone of voice as well. And you could ask Claude or AI to help you with authoring those docs. And then once you have those docs, have those in a folder that you could then point your LLMs to. It takes a little bit of time to set that up, but it's a high leverage thing to do that will save you a lot later on, where you don't have to like remind it again of certain things, because it's very much caught up with what you're up to.
I couldn't agree more. When I saw that tip, it was the first thing that I went, yes, that was a game changer for me too. And for those who are listening that don't know what we mean by LLM, think of it, it's either your Claude or it's your ChatGPT or it's your Gemini, whichever model you're using. Okay, great. So you've saved those core documents so that you can spit them across whichever model you're using. What's step 2?
So step 2, this came from the Atomic Habits book. So if you know the Atomic Habits book from James Clear, it's got a ton of great principles to think of in terms of like, how do you just get started with building good habits that then help you kind of, grow in an exponential way. So you could literally just ask Claude, can you make automations that can embody the Atomic Habits principles? And and that I could use to hold myself accountable as I move forward in my goals. So it's like the first thing that makes everything else better. And that's how I try to think about a lot. So it goes back to the foundational docs, and then the Atomic Habits, agent helps me with executing in a way that's, path of least resistance, with not getting in your own way and whatever things often block you that make you procrastinate, XYZ.
And I'm assuming you're going to tweak that to make sure it works for you, like we were saying before. So of all the Atomic Habits, some might not work, but some might. Okay, great. So you've got the documents, you've got the Atomic Habits agent that's going to help you lock in and execute. Step 3.
So step 3 then is a habit of locking in a flow state time slot. So
yes,
start simple, right? Try to just have one 90-minute chunk every day, just one, right? Mm-hmm. And this is harder, easier said than done, right? To actually mm-hmm. follow through on that, but to have a chunk where ideally your Atomic Habits agent and your foundational docs, if they're well written, both of those combined will help you realize what is the next most important big thing I need to do. Mm-hmm. And then that's my 90-minute slot, right? Let me dive in, go deep on that. And that will be the next thing that has that huge outsized impact for helping me move forward with my goals.
Yep. Okay, this is sounding very focused to me. I'm liking it. Yep. And stay with us if you're not someone who likes to focus, because come into 4.
And I'm not great with focusing, but this has helped me so much. Use it to help you address your weaknesses in a way.
As a practice.
Well, so here's the 4th thing, to think of the research piece. So you could set up a research agent. This is the way to kind of replace your social media and all the apps and the distractions piece, where your research agent is surfacing the things that would be helpful to you to help you with, achieving your goals based on all the context of the previous pillars, right? So it's showing you that next most important thing, rather than getting too swamped in all of it. And a helpful way to do research that I've been experimenting with recently is this skill called the last 30 days skill from Matt Van Horn. It's been around for a while, but it kind of keeps bubbling back up in traction. And it's designed in a way to notice signal of traffic that's a little bit more objective to the last 30 days of what's happening in the AI world, where if you were to individually look for these things yourself, it's kind of much more time intensive.
Is it fair to say that because you've gone back to step 1, where you're creating and curating your own LLM with that branding document that says, this is who I am, this is what I care about, this is what I'm working on, could you then with step 4, with this research component part, put those collections into your own curated pillars? Or is it more about getting a big overall glance, do you find, of what's going on?
It's a way to surface the thing that you need to see next based on like what's important to you right now, versus the problem where you go on Instagram and then you get overwhelmed.
Flooded.
Right.
Okay, yes, great. Flooded. So it's a filtering mechanism. I love it. Yes. Okay, I'm going to put the link in the notes below. Great. Step 5.
Yeah.
How do we pull it together?
Step 5 kind of goes hand in hand with the research piece, but it's to re-inspect your information diet. So if you think about it, right, in terms of like the food diet, we all know, what you eat really matters, the quality of it, and also the frequency of what you eat. So like I'm in the camp of taking breaks from eating is quite important and helpful, like from a fasting perspective. But in general with information, also taking breaks from, too much information is helpful. And also the quality of the information that you have is going to matter and shape your mind and outlook. So I've gone pretty extreme with eliminating notifications in my life. So I'm not really getting them as much, and it makes a profound difference. So kind of grooming your information diet. And this could be a focused session where you're doing this all at once, or it's a gradual thing where you're kind of pruning, on a recurring basis, where it's like, okay, I recognize that's not a great thing that I need to see all the time. Let me just, silence it or unsubscribe, from the flood of emails that I'm getting.
Control of your time that way too, as I'm imagining. Yeah, I mean, notifications as such, we all know we can turn them on and we can turn them off, but how many of us have all of them coming into our inbox, stealing our attention and focus at once? Yeah, it comes back to protecting the peace. That is brilliant. And I'm going to share that infographic in the links below. Have a look at it. I didn't tell you this, James, but I've printed it out and I've put it on my work wall. I'll have to send you a photo to show you, because it is just that, for me, compartmentalizing things. If getting started feels overwhelming, I can come back and say, okay, well, can I trim my research a little bit more, or can I open it up a little bit more? Have I only been feeding myself a particular kind of voice, and I actually want to hear a different kind of voice to expand my thinking? And to your point, can I trim my notifications, but also can I get away from the tech and go out into nature and get a different form of information with your information diet point as well? I'm pretty sure our listeners are going to want to follow up with you. Where's the best place to find you? I have dropped some hints during this interview, but be better coming from you, I think.
Sure. So I'm on YouTube, Instagram. My name is James Shechet. The AI guy is the handle across all of them. I'm also a voice actor. That's like a creative side hustle that I do as well, and why I'm in this interesting looking room that's a sound booth. And I'll do just like impressions of video game characters and animation characters and celebrities.
You can't leave the end of the interview with that tease. Can you give us an impression?
Sure.
Which is your favorite one at the moment?
I mean, Family Guy has been one of my signature impressions. So, how's it going, huh? Yep, the name's Peter Griffin, yeah.
Yes, so Stewie is the little kid that talks like this? Yes.
So...
You've got a separate channel if people want to go check out your voiceovers. Oh, what's that one?
James __ voices. I've been doing things where I'll co-post with both of them just because they intersect well. And I've just been figuring that out. And I just do what gives me energy and share it. And
keep sharing, because you're a standout creator as far as I'm concerned on the Internet of Things, and it's just a joy to see somebody using the tech in front of us in really new and novel ways, and giving us all permission just to get in and get amongst it, get messy and have some fun. So thank you for joining us today and sharing all the ways that you're using AI to harness your own intelligence, but also bring back that peace and purpose. I love it. Sounds to me like it's James, the AI guy, who's using exponential tech to protect his peace and create a purpose. I'm Mariane Power, and this is Jagged Brilliance. If you're done trying harder and ready to start building smarter, hit subscribe. Let's build systems that don't break the brilliant people inside them.